The Russian invasion of Ukraine is entering the 8th day, and casualties are mounting on both sides. For the first time since the start of the conflict, Moscow came out with a figure of casualties. Thus far, the Kremlin had denied that any Russian troops had been killed or wounded in the fighting. The battle where no one wins. According to the Russian RIA news agency, the Russian Ministry of Defense said that thus far, 498 Russian soldiers have been killed and 1597 wounded in the invasion of Ukraine. For comparison, if we were to take the official numbers issued by the Russian Ministry of Defense, it would mean that in 6 days, more Russian troops have been killed in Ukraine thus far than the total number of British fatalities in 20 years in Afghanistan. But the official Russian casualty figures are much smaller than what the Ukrainians are claiming. On Wednesday, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense stated that more than 5,800 Russian troops had been killed. Western officials seem to agree with the Ukrainians on this. According to NBC News, Western officials believe that the numbers that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense has been pushing to the public are closer to the accurate number of Russian troops killed or wounded in action than what the Kremlin is claiming. It is important, however, to take into account the fog of war. Commanders on both sides are ordered to report their casualties to their higher-ups, usually at the end of the day. But numbers can get skewed or even be inaccurate for a unit that is under attack and is suffering from bad communications, as seems to be the case with a lot of Russian formations, which have even resulted in using commercial radios to communicate. The fog of war will prevent an accurate body count until a ceasefire or a truce. There is also the issue of prisoners of war. Both sides have captured prisoners. According to the Pentagon, there are indications that several Russian units have surrendered en masse or have sabotaged their own vehicles to avoid fighting. That is a result of bad morale, as a Russian prisoner of war accounts suggest that they didn't know that they were invading Ukraine until they started receiving fire from the Ukrainians. The civilian toll. As the Russian military is adapting to the fierce Ukrainian resistance and is changing its approach by seemingly targeting urban centers, including Kyiv, Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Kherson, the civilian casualties are bound to spiral out of control. The civilian toll is already high. According to the United Nations, 227 Ukrainian citizens have been killed and 525 wounded since the eve of the Russian invasion. The UN Human Rights Office, OHCHR, assesses that the actual number might be even higher and will continue to rise as the fighting continues. Ukrainian authorities are claiming a much larger number, approximately 2,000 killed. But, as is the case with military casualties, the fog of war prevents outside observers from coming up with an accurate figure. As Russia continues its conflict in Ukraine, the military assault has already resulted in a shocking number of deaths. In the early hours of Thursday morning last week, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine with explosions heard across major cities including the country's capital, Kyiv. Ukraine's Ministry of Interior said 352 civilians have been killed in Ukraine following the Russian invasion, as of Sunday. At least 14 of those killed are children, according to the ministry, and another 1,684 people, including 116 children, have been injured. On Monday, Ukrainian authorities said that dozens of people had been killed and hundreds more wounded in rocket strikes in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. The mayor of Kharkiv put the confirmed number of people killed in the attack at 9. He also said 37 people had been injured, including 3 children. It had previously been reported that 13 border guards on Zamini Island in the Odessa region had been killed. They refused to surrender after the island was invaded by 2 Russian warships. However, it is now understood that the group are alive and are being held captive by Russian forces. It is not yet clear how many Ukrainian soldiers have died. On the Russian side, Ukraine's defense ministry has claimed that more than 5,000 enemy soldiers have been killed in the fighting so far. The country Ukraine is constantly in the news after the conflict with Russia. The country Ukraine says that more than 100 people have been assassinated so far in the invasion of Russia, with fighting across the board throughout the country and Russian force advancing towards the capital, Kyiv. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, ordered wide-ranging attacks on Ukraine on Thursday, 24 February 2022, hitting several cities and bases with airstrikes or shelling, and assailing by land and sea. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, said around 137 civilians and military personnel had been assassinated in the country on the first day of the Russian invasion. He called them heroes in a video footage address early on Friday, 25 February 2022, in which he also stated 316 individuals have been injured. Referring to Russian forces, Zelensky stated that they are assassinating people and turning peaceful cities into military targets. It is foul and will never be forgiven. Bursts heard in the capital early on Friday were explained by the lay siege to the government as horrific rocket strikes. The explosions in Kyiv set off the second day of an invasion that has already displaced at least 100,000 individuals, as per the United Nations Refugee Agency. Kyiv reported that 18 individuals were assassinated at a military base near the Black Sea port of Odessa in the deadliest single strike of the attack of Russia. The mayor of Mariupol asserted on Thursday, 24 February 2022, that 3 civilians had been assassinated in the eastern port city and 6 others wounded in the invasion of Russia. Emergency services state a boy was assassinated in the Kharkiv region of eastern Ukraine after shelling struck an apartment building. On Thursday, the military of Ukraine stated it had destroyed 4 Russian tanks on a road near Kharkiv, assassinated 50 troops close to a town in the Luhansk region, and downed 6 Russian warplanes elsewhere in the east. Russia rejected reports its aircraft or armored vehicles have been annihilated. Russian-backed separatists asserted to have downed 2 Ukrainian planes. Ukrainian cops stated on Thursday that Russia had carried out around 203 attacks since the starting of the day. Ukraine stated Russian forces had captured the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, prompting concern from international nuclear watchdogs. The Defense Ministry of Moscow stated on Thursday its forces had successfully completed their objectives for the day, earlier asserting to have destroyed more than 70 Ukrainian military targets, including 11 airfields. The Defense Ministry stated it had neutralized Ukrainian military airbases and its air defense systems. Vladimir Putin is the Russian president is at the center as Russia has been launched a war against their neighbors Ukraine. There have been many reports in the single night of bombing, explosions, and the military vehicles of Russia entered Ukraine that is from the different parts of the borders along with Russia. These are with the developing numbers of casualties which have been counted from both the sides. This event of invasion in Ukraine has been fetched the fear in the president of this place, and this was highlighted for months and indeed years also. The president was given attention several times in his career, and he was also in the limelight when he passed an order to the troops into 2 pro-Russian breakaway regions are in eastern Ukraine. With the attack taking place on a massive scale, the Western officials and the analysts had been scoffed at Putin's claims that the troops of the Russian were sent into the regions will act as peacekeepers, has been also saying that the newest action might be a precursor to which has been the larger invasion of Ukraine. Political analysts have been predicting that Russia might be pulling a move for a minute, given continued warfare in the Donbass between separatists, underwritten by Russia, and Ukrainian troops. Nevertheless, the president is now ready to take more action. It will become and appear more wide-ranging than expected. A statement from Kremlin passed on Thursday morning in which Putin will be seen saying that for how long the operations of the military would be last, based on its progress and aims. Dmitry Peskov is the spokesman of Putin, who has been told to the Secures that Ukraine must have to be liberated, but nobody is talking about the occupation for Ukraine's people. Almost 1,700 people are detained from the stress as they are on the protests. Russia had been also built up tens of thousands of troops on side of the Ukraine border, an act of adjuration which might be the spiral in the largest military fight on European soil in decades.